This week, we are talking about wellness. We got a comment that came in. It says, I am a small business and I want to take care of my employees' well being. What are other companies doing to support mental health at work? So I'll go first and just say, you're doing the right thing by asking the right questions. What are other groups doing? Mental health is such a big thing these days, and it's really become an umbrella topic. Before, we may have thought mental health to just be like meditation or yoga or doing things to settle the mind. But now we know that mental health has a lot to do with not only settling the mind, but even the chemical makeup of our mental well being, and if there are factors at play with regard to stress, anxiety, ADD, ADHD, any manner of mental health concerns that we need to be paying attention to. And so, I think the first thing that other people are doing that you should be doing is listening to your staff about what is important to them. But then another thing is, figure out the perks that you need to complement your benefit offerings. What do you think, Summer?
Absolutely. I was very excited to see this question come through because I do think that so much has changed in just the last few years about even being able to speak about this freely is a very important component to, I describe it as the whole person, right? So not just thinking your team member as a worker, but thinking about what is it that they need that I can help support, and it doesn't have to be just within just within the box of work. There's a lot of things that as a company or an employer that companies can do to help support them outside of work. And if that's going to allow them to bring their best self, feeling fully supported, that allows them to bring their best self to work, then everybody truly wins. And when I have these conversations with leaders, I'm always speaking with them about making sure that they have, I talk about culture, but, helping really design and create a culture that is very intentional, especially when it comes to wellness. Like just taking a shotgun approach is never going to work. Like I think the message that I'm trying to send is to make sure that you have a well thought out plan. And you touched on that. It starts by having conversations with your team members. When I think about this on like a tactical approach, it's one, creating policies that also support physical health in addition to their mental health. It's, providing options for people to care for their parents, care for their families. And this is through, your time off and leave policies internally. And we do this on our Jumpstart team. And I'm absolutely a huge fan is creating a safe space to actually have these conversations, where we can all be vulnerable and we can all share from some of our experiences and identify who could best benefit from maybe just a little extra dialogue and support. And, just kind of a couple other thoughts, and I'd love to hear your opinion of this, is really training managers, first and foremost, how to recognize burnout, how to support their team members with any sort of needs or requests that they may have, and training them on like how to build deeper connections. I don't think that's really been part of what I've heard leaders discuss as, important topics to tackle with their team. But, I know that you're in the trenches, Joey, and you're talking to business leaders all of the time. And so what are you hearing in these discussions that companies are considering doing to help support their team in those areas?
Well, I'll be honest, Summer. This there's a scary thing about this topic, and it's that it's not being talked about enough. I think in circles and trenches that I'm in, I'm hearing conversations that are hey, we need to find talent, we want to keep talent, but it's still at that like first layer of the onion. And so it's really having the patience and intentionality behind guiding them to that second layer of, okay, you say you want this. Here is what it here's an aspect of what it takes to get that. And so it's almost like an aha moment happening across the board for different companies and different leaders of companies to say, oh, I didn't realize that that was so important. And I didn't realize that it's attainable. I mean, anything from getting Calm subscriptions for your team to understanding the importance that PTO plays on mental health, and this being being in the month of June and being a big month for diversity and awareness. Realizing that people don't always feel comfortable at work because they don't feel accepted at work, or they don't feel that they can bring their full self to work. And so understanding how all of that plays, a person's background and identity, and feeling like they can fully belong. So it's an uphill climb, I think, Summer, to get where we need to be on the conversation of mental health and mental wellness. But it doesn't mean to throw in the towel. If anything, it just means lean in and keep pushing forward.
You're so right. And, I describe that as we don't have to have all of the answers. And that in itself should not prevent us from starting to make progress. And so, to circle back to our question and provide what I feel like clear direction, I think that if we were working with a small business and they were very committed to creating their first strategy for wanting to address mental health and wellness, I think we would start with doing a pulse survey of their team and try to understand first, well, what is it that the team feels like they're lacking or that they need? And then with that information, we'd work with decision makers to understand like what type of culture do they want to create, how do we address some of the gaps in the needs, and actually creating a plan. And of course, that plan is always impacted by a budget. So if there's a very small budget, then we will look for, what type of resources, policies, and training we can provide that's low or no cost. And then, of course, as there is a budget or the budget grows, then we can layer on like some of those cool resources that you mentioned are online. There's counseling, there's coaching apps, and something that doesn't typically cost much that does have a huge effect is allowing greater work flexibility.
Yeah. And Summer, you've seen your journey with Jumpstart here, but part of improving mental health at work is having systems and processes that work or that are in place. And if you don't have them today, build them so that your team's experience with your work does not negatively hinder their mental health. I think of, hearing stories from friends or my wife or just anybody, and, they people complain about work, right? So you have to be honest with your work environment and say, okay, well, what is it about my environment that people are complaining about? They aren't necessarily coming home and saying, "Oh gosh, my boss doesn't have a Calm subscription for me." They're saying "Hey, I can't find this form. I have to go through all this paperwork. I've got to talk to 10 people to get a yes on something." And so figure out the things that you can do to improve the employee experience at your job, and that can have as great a impact on mental health as maybe some of these more external things.